Explosive, I would say all the time. It's really making me think every time I read it. It's called Let's Talk Native Pride.blogspot.com, so you might want to check him out. And he's here now. He wants to talk to us, and I invited him down because he has a direct connection with the Indigenous people here in the Six Nations in this area up in New York. So this is John Kane, a good friend of mine. Thanks.
I'm Winnegahaga, and that means I'm of the people from the land of Clinton. We're known as Mohawks. I live in the territory of the Winnegahaga, which is the Haudenosaunee people who live in the area of the mountains of western New York. You know the Senecas. My wife is Unyota, and you may know that those people as Oneida. I am very, very tied to the people of the Haudenosaunee, not only because I am Haudenosaunee, which again is a word that means people who belong to us. And I'm very connected to all of the territories of the Six Nations of the Haudenosaunee. I've had the pleasure and the honor of guest hosting for Tiogasin on First Voice of Indigenous Radio when Tiogasin travels or when he decides to go home, as he says, to go home and charge his batteries a little bit. I've had the privilege of guest hosting his show, and on one of those occasions, last summer, I was packing up from my hotel room, getting ready to leave, and I got a couple of emails that suggested that I go down to the UN because it was August 12th and it was World Indigenous Peoples Day. And I said, you know, I'm not really a big fan. And I'll get into a little bit about my concerns about the UN and their best efforts in dealing with Native issues. But I was further encouraged because the program topic was Indigenous voices in the media. And I said, well, that's kind of interesting. Maybe I will go. Because the first thing that struck me is I was one of only 2 hosts in the entire state of New York that have a radio show, and I happened to be guest hosting the other one. And nobody thought well, maybe we're in New York City, perhaps we should reach out to the Native person who's on the radio in New York City. And so that wasn't to be, so I went. And that's where I had the pleasure of meeting Professor Kalanui. She was on the panel, in fact, and did a wonderful job there, just as she did here. Eventually, they opened up the floor to the folks sitting in the assembly, basic General Assembly, and I was sitting right up front. And I was chosen first, and I probably talked much longer than the moderator wanted me to. As a matter of fact, they didn't bring out the hook, but I think they thought about it. And I raised those various issues. The first issue about, you know, why you wouldn't reach out to somebody, a Native person on the radio to talk about Indigenous media. But I also raised the issue that if the UN really wanted to play a role in trying to encourage Native voices in the media, they should probably try to do some sort of endorsement, some solicitation, try to get public radio producers, public radio stations, underwriters, to draw attention to it. Here the UN was taking a day out of its business. Ban Ki-moon was there. The Undersecretary for Economic Development was there. And yet nobody addressed you know, to me, which was the obvious. Perhaps it's time to put a little bit of pressure on the folks in public radio, because carving out an hour of public radio is the easiest way to afford a Native produced show to get on the air. Because buying a station is expensive. I am not afforded an hour. I buy my time. I'm on commercial radio. I'm on WWKB. It's one of those legendary rock and roll stations from the 50s, back when AM was king of music. And they are considered the left Entercom Communications, which owns the company, almost 5 stations, which is the way the radio business is done now. You have one company that owns 5, 6, 7, 8 stations in a given market, and so they have the flagship station, and then they have their redheaded stepchild. Well, WWKB is the redheaded stepchild, but the reason for me to be on that program is it happens to bang out with a 50,000 watt signal, a very powerful signal, especially in the evening, especially in the wintertime, My show can actually be picked up on AM radio as far as Hartford, Connecticut. I've had Jay Nightwolf, who does a show down in D.C. Every once in a while, he'll run his car, sit in his car, and turn on the AM radio and see if he can pick me up on a Sunday night. I started off buying an hour, and frankly, I don't know how you guys do it. When Joseph does a show for an hour, and when I guess those for him, I just feel like there's not enough time to even get a point across. And Tioga does an effective job, as brother covered, but it's tough. And especially if you want to really try to engage and get into a deeper conversation. It is really hard to do it in a 1 hour format. So when I garnered enough support to purchase another hour, I went to 2 hours. So I'm on from Sunday nights from 9 to 11. I have business cards I'll distribute to each one. Any of you can have one, so you don't need to write all this stuff down. I do write a blog, as Theosin mentioned. I've been doing that for a long time. I've been doing that since 2007, 2008. I've been on radio doing my own show, Let's Talk Native with John Kane, I'm almost finished my 3rd year right now. And why do it? I mean, why do radio? And this is kind of the key to what Josep's panel was really here to discuss. The reason to do radio is because we have to get some of this information out there, and we've got to do it compellingly. We've got to do it in a way that we engage an audience. And it's not enough to do a blog. It's not enough to do internet radio. It's not enough to do a YouTube video every once in a while. If you don't have someplace on the dial when somebody's in a car and when somebody's at home or whatever, you almost need a foundation. Radio is that perfect foundation. And whether it's commercial radio, that paid programming like mine, or whether it's a university supported station or a public radio or semi/public radio, there's all kinds of animals out there. The reality is, to the extent that Tioga mentioned native-owned stations, many of the native-owned stations don't even have much native programming. Most of them, they get into this as a venture. They get into this as a commercial venture. So what happens is the native, and I can say this because the Seneca Nation owns a radio station in Western New York. I'm not on it. They're trying to make a commercial success of this thing, and it's pretty much failing miserably. So they don't treat it as a community service. They don't treat it as a means for them to control their own messages out there. They just play, good, easy listening rock and roll, kind of the milk toast stuff that you can find on a lot of these internet radio stations. So that's what they do there. I think that's going to change because I think they're seeing the fall of their ways. But that goes to that. You can go throughout Indian country. You can go out through all native territories, and you're going to find many native radio stations that maybe carve out a program here or there. But by and large, most of the programming on these stations are not really geared towards servicing their own community or doing an outreach to the non-native community. I'm in Buffalo. Again, in the territory of the Seneca Nation, Western New York, powerful signal. I know that by and large, most of the people who are listening to my show are non-native. Most of my callers, it is a live show, it's a call-in show. Most of my callers are non-native. I do know that I have a strong native listenership. Again, hand out cards, you can go to my blog. I also have a page on KB's website. All of my shows are archived, you can listen to them. I will admit on the KB page, only for the last year have I written pretty much a description, so the dates are just dates. But on my blog, I pretty much have always had a description on the shows. And I've done shows that range from everything, from our conflicts with New York State, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that because we're here and the bastions of power of New York State are down in this neck of the woods. So I got to take my shots at Andrew Cuomo and others, so I'll do that while I'm here. I do that. I take the opportunity to talk about the battles that we have with New York State. I also take the opportunity to talk about the battles we have with Washington. We are now living in a time where there's a Democrat in the White House and a Democrat in the governor's mansion. And we have some of the worst relationships with New York State and the federal government we've ever had. And I know the Crow gave Obama an Indian name. And there are people in the Indian country that would suggest that he's the greatest president that the native people have ever seen. Well, first off, I guess to clear a couple of things up. he's not my president, and Andrew Cuomo's not my governor. I'm Gunyagahaga. I'm not an American. I don't condemn those who are Americans. I don't condemn those who want to be Americans. I don't condemn Native people who want to be Americans. But the presumption that because I'm walking on the same streets that I'm American, and that I should somehow have some sort of patriotic duty. I'm one of those guys who don't understand why so many Native people enlist in the armed services. You know, frankly, other than it just being a continuation of a mentality that was born out of residential schools. But so I have some issues with that. On my show, I don't talk about what everybody else talks about. I really try to take the mystery out of what being a Native is. I don't talk a whole lot about Native spirituality. I don't try to interpret our creation story for neither for the Native people listening or for the non-Native people. I have an opinion on that, and I have an opinion on a lot of things, and I'll share those. But that's not why I do radio. And in fact, if I do venture to talk about creation story, I'm going to talk about the pragmatic effect of it and why there's a moral to the story. I'm not going to preach about it as if it was Genesis from the Bible. I'm also not a fan of Indian treaties because they aren't. We didn't write them, we didn't ask for them, although we paid dearly for them. Those are a matter of U.S. law, even though a good number of them were improperly ratified or not ratified at all on either side. Most of them are just a function of fraud and stealing land. Most of them have been broken in any number of ways. And I'll tell you, again, Haudenosaunee, one of the treaties that always gets brought up is the 1794 Treaty of Canandaigua. Oh, it's the seminal treaty of all treaties. Well, I'm sorry, that's bullshit. There's 7 articles in that treaty. 3 of them say the same thing, that the United States acknowledges that our land is ours and they will never claim the same. Never means never to me, but apparently it doesn't mean never to the United States. We're locked in the throes every single day, battling with New York State, trying to assert their jurisdiction, their sovereignty, their regulations, their laws on our people. So how the hell can New York State do that if the United States itself claims they will never claim our land? Well, we still maintain that our land is our land, in spite of what in spite of how they try to adjudicate it away, in spite of how they try to legislate it away. We're still there. These treaties, oftentimes people try to hang on a singular thing on the thing to say, oh yeah, this is proof this, look this. Every year there's a woman who sits down in Washington who's, among her many duties, is to requisition $4,500 worth of cloth. Because in the Canandaigua Treaty, there's a payment that was supposed to go on forever. And this payment was a payment in livestock, in farm equipment, in tools, and in cloth. In 1794, that was $4,500. Today, it's still $4,500. And for 100,000 Haudenosaunee, that breaks down to 4.5 cents worth of cloth each year. And yet, there are Native people who will treat that stuff like the shroud of Turin. I'm sorry, there's not enough cloth in 4.5 cents worth to do anything with, let alone wipe your ass. So, I'm not going to honor treaty cloth. I have some serious problems with anybody who would sit there and march up to a podium with a table there, lay out some cloth that they just got from the Bureau of Indian Affairs and say, look, there's the United States honoring its end of the deal. I'm sorry. And to me, it is as bold an insult as they could make. So unlike my friend here, I do talk a lot on my show, and I express opinion. My show is a news and views. Now, again, why do it? Because it matters. Because it makes a difference. And I'll tell you, I'll give you a few examples. Some of them may not be the most life-changing for all people, but we had an incident a couple of years ago where in New York, in Seneca Territory, they have a thing called a foundation called the Seneca Diabetes Foundation. And once a year, they do their gala event to raise money. And, you know, it's a black tie affair. I don't go too often. They hosted, on occasion, and on this occasion, they hosted the Seneca Niagara Casino, which is the casino in Niagara Falls that's owned by the Seneca doings, and there's a lot of non-native politicians and civic leaders and that kind of stuff that go to these events. So, and it's in a casino. It is an alcoholic event. I mean, there's a bar and that kind of stuff. So at the end of the day, or after the event, down in the main lobby of the Seneca Niagara Casino, two Seneca gentlemen who were having a lively discussion. No, they were having an argument. They were calling each other down about. They're competing in the tobacco business with each other, which is another issue we're looking at. And they were having a dispute. And some little guy who happens to be a New York State Senator by the name of Mark Grisanti decided that he was going to insert himself into the discussion and say, oh, come on, you guys, why don't you just settle down? It's been a nice event. You don't need to be acting like that. Now, mind you, this is a Seneca event. These are Seneca gentlemen having this conversation. And it's in a Seneca venue. And as this guy approaches this event, this disturbance, it's already been broken up. But he decided he wanted to insert himself into the whole thing. It didn't go well. To make a long story short, Mark Grisanti was rolling around on the casino floor. His wife came out, threw a drink in a Seneca woman's face, which I would never advise anybody to throw a drink into a Seneca woman's face. And actually raped her across the face with her fingernails. And so Mark Grisanti's wife got the crap pounded out of her as well. And of course it all got broken up. Immediate headlines, and I'm not talking about Western New York Times, Washington Post, all over. In Europe they were reporting how a New York State Senator was savagely attacked by Indians at the casino. That was the headline. That was the immediate headline. I had folks that were there, come on my show, had somebody with cell phone video, piece of video. Within a day after my show, the headlines had turned around. So it was no longer New York State Senator attacked by Indians. And there was no more firewater comments. There were no more savage beatings. There was no more all the negative native epithets they're going to put on there to describe what Mark Grisanti claimed happened to him. As a result of that, me telling the other story, the real story, of course the big question, well, when are we going to see the video? So casinos have surveillance cameras, you're never going to see the video. It's not my fault, but you're never going to see the video. That's not the nature of doing surveillance in a casino. It's not to drag somebody down. The police will look at it if there was a warrant and a charge, and somebody would be charged. And of course, everything that I said turned out to be true. Everything Mark Grisanti, this New York Senator said, and his wife said, and they did press conference after press conference after press conference. Even his handlers were telling him, Mark, will you please shut the bleep up? You're not helping yourself any. My show, small show, on AM radio in Western New York, changed that message. Now, as a result of doing that, it also thrust the idea of a native talk show host into other media sources. Channel 2, I've been on Channel 2 does a talk show on midday, right? That's the NBC affiliate in Buffalo. I've been on Two Sides for Christy Reserve a dozen times now. Susan Arbetter, who does a show called Capitol Press Room up in the Albany area, and it's on 20 other markets. Been on her show a dozen times. WBFO, which is the public radio station in Western New York, I've been on that program. Now all of a sudden, because I proved that I can be credible as a native radio talk show host, now they have somebody they can go to that's not going to give one-word answers. I don't mean to disparage Native people when they get in front of a camera or get to a microphone, but too often our guys give one-word answers, and that does not make for good radio. It does not make for good television, and so that's oftentimes why you don't see it. And not to mention the fact that a lot of people will be gun shy. I'm not one of those people. I'm willing to talk about the issues and talk about the issues in a way that I think are engaging. I think it's important that people understand that the way the media portrays Native issues, or their failure to address Native issues, is something that's got to change. It's one of the things that I brought up again at that UN conference, or the UN event last summer. The other thing I brought up at the UN was what I considered be among the huge failings that the UN Declaration of the Rights of the Indigenous People represents. One of the questions that I put to the panel, including my guests that are here, was where does the rubber meet the road on this thing? Now, how do we end up, if not giving it force, but give it some meaning? Because frankly, the Declaration itself, as was indicated, falls pretty short on a lot of issues. It still really almost entrenches that relationship of the dominator versus the dominated. I mean, it is really, if you read it, it almost says it that way. I mean, it enforces the idea that you have an indigenous people who are entitled to some rights by their suppressors. I'm sorry, that's the way it reads. But it does do a couple of things. The third affirmation of the UN DRIP is as close to a UN attack on the doctrine of Christian discovery that exists anywhere. It really just calls it, without naming it, because they're not quite that bold yet. Although the World Indigenous Peoples Forum may finally get to that point next year, we'll see. The doctrine of Christian discovery is again, as Theo mentioned, it is born out of people both from the 15th century. It is essentially not about converting native people into Christianity. It's not about saving souls. It was about expanding Christendom. It was about, and by Christendom it means creating a dominant society and dominating the land, the people, and the resources. Everything that we talk about here, this whole conference that is talking about the ecological issues, it's about, and again, as Professor Caronu is discussing, it's all about exploiting the land and oftentimes either removing the native people that are there, or, and it is an act of genocide. Assimilation is an act of genocide, or converting them into something that they never were. Trying to turn them into American citizens, trying to turn them into New Yorkers or Canadians or Albertans or whatever. That's what, and that's born out of the doctrine of Christian discovery. I mean, and it is clear. It's clear. I've had Stephen Newcomb, who is really the foremost authority on the subject. He's been on my show twice. I got 4 hours of Stephen Newcomb. You can look it up. It's on my webpage. I actually brought Stephen Newcomb on when I guest hosted for Teokusin this last month, the month before. And his work, his book, which is Pagans in the Promised Land, Decoding the Doctrine of Christian Discovery, is the most important work on the subject done anywhere. He's brought that issue to the UN on several occasions, but if you ask Stephen Newcomb what his view about the UN doing anything with it, he's not optimistic. And nor mine. But I still will go down to the UN. If it's a forum to address issues, then I'm going to take that opportunity. And just like I'm paying every week to be on a commercial radio station, it's important. It's important work that we do. It's important work that we get it out there. It's important that we stand up and we fight for these issues. I'm rocking my I Don't Know More t-shirt. The problem I have with I Don't Know More is, frankly, it was a little too passive. And I know Deborah agrees with me on that because we've had some conversations on Facebook over it. They took a very strong position against nonviolent direct action. I'm Mohawk. It's in my genetic makeup to well, sometimes nonviolent direct action, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do. So the idea of just doing nice round dances to address subject, it's nice to draw attention to it. The last nice round dance I went to, I got into a scuffle with a Cheektowaga police officer because he was trying to shut it down. To me, that's my kind of demonstration. So it's on YouTube, by the way. You can look up Cheektowaga police. Anyway, I have that. I also have a video from going to the UN, and that's on my blog, my videos on my blog as well. But you have to resist, and there are ways to resist. The one thing about standing up and really actually getting physical without getting myself arrested with a policeman. And I became the center of the attention, and I didn't go there for that. I was in a round dance like everybody else. But I saw a mall cop like losing his mind, and I asked him, "We got a problem?" He goes, "You're fucking right, we have a problem." He says, "I got the Cheektowaga police, the Williamsville police, and the Clarence police coming here right now, and you're gonna arrest all your asses." Really? even like smile at this guy. I did lots of smiling with the Chief Geography Police officer. As he grabbed me and I walked him back 3 or 4 steps, and I said, and I again smiled broadly, and I said, "You really want to do this? Just look at this. There's like hundreds of people here. There was maybe 5 or 600 people, not the 5,000 you would see at the Edmonton Mall or even the Mall of America, but I disarmed him. I did. I changed his mind, and that's my point. My point is, you can't just write letters to congressmen, and you can't just Facebook each other. Sometimes you got to do stuff. Sometimes you got to stand up. And the idea of doing radio is not to be, for me, is never to be the last word on any of these subjects. It's to continue the conversation, encourage the conversation, feed the conversation, so the conversation continues. And so that conversation goes beyond the conversation and then turns into action. We do need to stand in the way of the XL pipeline. And it's not just about pipelines that leak. It's about the idea of wiping out an area the size of Florida and Alberta, wiping out a boreal forest, and creating, right now, their inability to get those tar sands oils to market is the bottleneck that is everything slowing it down right now. I don't think just stopping the Keystone XL pipeline is enough. There's going to have to be more direct action than that. And it's not just on us, it's on all of you. At some point, we all need to stand up. It's nice to have an opinion about something. But if people don't stand up and do things about it, then that opinion is meaningless. And we can't all do everything all of the time. Part of the reason I got into radio is, frankly, I'm not getting any younger. I've had my knockdown drag-outs. And it's like I tell people, I only got about half a can of whoop-ass left in me. and I'm saving it. So in the meantime, I'll dance with the Chihuahua police officer, but I hope I don't have to wrestle. But somebody may have to. When I really got involved in Native issues, I was in my 20s. You know, and I really got active. And when you're 20, you're bulletproof and invisible. You can do all kinds of things. I'm a grandfather now. I've raised 3 children. And I raised 3 children on Native territory. And I'm going to digress a little bit. I raised 3 kids. I didn't put one of them through rehab, and I haven't had to bail one of them out of jail. I've had to be bailed out of jail a few times along those ways. But I trust me. When I had to get bailed out of jail, it was because I was fighting for something I believed in. It wasn't because I was, got caught doing something. I have 6 grandchildren now. When you're young and you're an activist, and even when you're a father, you don't anticipate, at least I did, maybe other people, you don't anticipate being a grandparent. And you don't know what that does to you. I've also had the misfortune to see my middle daughter lose her husband, fine son of a Seneca young man, to bone cancer a year ago last December. There's reasons people get bone cancer, and oftentimes those reasons have to do with what's happened to our territories, to that pollution in the ground. Onondaga Lake is the most polluted lake in the country, in the United States. 13 feet of mercury in the bottom of Onondaga Lake. Upstream of the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation is West Valley Nuclear Storage Facility. And it's funny, they talk about, they don't call it, there's another word for it, they don't call it breach, but they talk about when they have a leak, essentially, when that radioactivity makes it into the Cattaraugus Creek, they got a word for it. But so that's what we have in this. But of course, I know Geocasin has addressed it on his show, the open uranium mines in the Lakota territory. The coal top, the mountaintop removal for coal, hydrofracking, not just the pipelines issues, but all of it. In Akwesasne, which is a Mohawk territory at the top of the state, Akwesasne is a unique place in that somebody decided they were going to put a line, pretend there's a line that goes through the river there, and they call one side of it Canada and the other side the United States. And then on the side that's on the Canadian side, they call one part of it Ontario and the other part of it Quebec. So in Akwesasne, Mohawk territory, you've got a native territory, a Gunagahaga territory that is divided by 2 provinces, a state, and 2 countries. So you have Alcoa and GM that have basically polluted the area so bad, and there's several Superfund sites up there on the St. River, on the Grass River, and a couple of the other rivers up there. Leukemia is a bomb. Even doing basic farming, they had a problem where their cattle were dying, their teeth were falling out. And nobody talks about this stuff. That's why we have to do radio. That's why what Tiogasin does is important. That's why what Professor Kawanui does is important. But the thing is, there needs to be more voices. And for those of us, what we do is we take these shows and we put them on the internet. And sometimes we make a YouTube video, or we talk about it on Facebook. This information has to get out, and it's relevant and it's important. Because things have to be done. And it matters because it does affect change. Now, I'm not saying we're winning the battle, but I will say this. This generation, and I'm not going to say this with a whole lot of caution, this generation is done to advance sovereignty than the 7 before us. Yeah, I said it. I just called down my ancestors. I'm sorry, because when we talk 7 generations, we've got to go farther back than that before we have people who really have their minds right. Corn Planter, Handsome Lake, these guys signed away more land. When I hear people condemn our young people, the alcoholism that existed in Seneca territory, for instance, and not just Seneca territory, but in the whole territory of the Haudenosaunee from 1790s, that Canandaigua Treaty, I told you the good parts. The bad parts is all the land got ceded, except for a couple of tiny little spots, which they got screwed out of subsequently from that. So from 1784 to 1848, we still had our language. We still had traditional chiefs. What we didn't have is we didn't have a clan system anymore. What we had was arrogant men in our territory who bought into the male-dominant society bullshit that Thomas Jefferson, Alexander Hamilton, and others were pushing on. Women didn't get taken out of our fields because the plow was too heavy for them. Trust me. Our women could handle the plow. Women got taken out of our fields because those men were convinced that you needed to put women in the home. You needed to take them out of the fields. You couldn't let the women dominate or control the food supply. You couldn't let women be the title holders of that land, not the owners, because we don't own the land. We vested the title of our land in our women because they were holding it for the faces unborn. I'll tell you a story. There was a gentleman, and I heard the story once. A gentleman shows up to a old native guy. Of course, first thing he called him was Chief. Hey, Chief. Do you know who owns this land? And he said, yeah, because I'd like to buy it. I got lots of money to spend. He says, yeah, I know who owns this land. And he says, well, where can I find them? They're not here. Oh, when are they going to be here? He turns and he looks and he sees, he looks back and he sees a couple of young women over there. One of them's got a bit of a belly. About 3 months. I'll tell you what, Chief, I'll be back in 3 months. 3 months later, he comes there. And he says, did those people who own that land show up yet? He says, no, the folks who own this land are not here yet. Not here yet. Really? He says, what do you think they're going to be here? He leans back and he sees a woman there taking care of a little baby. Sees another little girl, only just a little tiny bump. 6 months. The guy comes back 6 months. And this repeated. What he didn't understand was that land is for the unborn faces. Once you're born, your job becomes to maintain that land stays for the unborn faces. We've had some bad history. And although I don't think we're winning the war yet, this generation has done a lot. Folks like some of the ones that are here. And folks that you'll never know their names. Some that are no longer with us. There's been plenty that have stood up and have changed the conversation. People didn't, sovereignty isn't our word. We took one from you, from French anyway. The closest word we have in Mohawk means to carry yourself. So when we talk about sovereignty, we look at it differently the way Europeans do. And in fact, in 1776, when the colonists decided that they needed to somehow break the chains that bound them to England, they needed to. This wasn't just about an impending war. They had to build a rationale. They had to explain how it is that the rest of the world could accept that they were going to break their ties to their motherland. So where did they come up with such a rationale? Well, they came up with it from us. The idea that sovereignty was bestowed upon a royal family by God, that was the European model. And there was some buzz in Europe at the time, with Locke, Voltaire, different people that talked about these kinds of things, and that geez, maybe we don't have it quite right. Poor people were starting to say, I don't know that I like this system. So where in the world did the system exist where sovereignty was a birthright? Here. And I'm not just talking, I'm speaking of Haudenosaunee, but I know that it wasn't as Haudenosaunee lands. It was here that the concept that you were born, and not just we as people, but all of creation. The creation, and I'm not going to say the creator, I'm not going to say great spirit, creation provided a path for everything that we see, whether it's the moon across the sky, whether it's the stars across the sky, whether it's the thunders that come through, whether it's the strawberries that grow, whether it's our children, whether it's a rabbit, whatever it is. We all, in fact, we sometimes refer to it as our original message, our original instructions. You'll hear that sometimes if you're around in the country long enough. Again, I try to put it in a way that people understand it. We've all been provided with a path. That path is natural. And so that path is a part of being born, it's a part of being created. It is not something and it's individual. We all have the right and the responsibility. The responsibility, what's the word? We have that responsibility to carry ourselves. We also have a responsibility to carry others and to help others and to make sure that we get back to the cage and that kind of thing. But sovereignty is an individual birthright, in my way. It is not a collective right. It is a right we defend collectively, but it's not the tribe's power. It's not the BIA's recognized leadership that has that power. It is not the chief, it's not the clan mother, it's not the president, it's not the trustee, it's not band council chief. They are not the ones who have been invested or vested with that authority. Every one of the children, all of us are. And we've never divested ourselves of that to them, nor have we divested any of that to the state, the federal government, the province. The question about treaties isn't where in the treaty does it say you can sell cigarettes. The question is, where did we give you the right to tell us what we do on our territories? The whole conversation has to be turned around. We don't need to defend our sovereignty in their courts of law. And if we get dragged to their courts of law, let them produce the foundation for their imposition, for their subjugation. Because I guarantee the only place they can never take it back to is going to be the papal bulls from 1493. Because there is no foundation of law. Because you can't adjudicate our sovereignty away, and you can't legislate it. The international community, they would never say, well, if you pass a law in this country that says this person, in 1924, the U.S. Senate declared all native people born in the United States, when the boundary of the United States, were U.S. citizens. I didn't ask to be a U.S. citizen. And they did, and the fact of the matter is, perhaps some did. And there were a few little ways that people could do that. Part of it had to do with military service before that. But when they passed the law, the Haudenosaunee rejected it, as did others. You can't just pass a law and say that somebody ceased to exist. I mean, you pass, I'll say, I take it back. Yes, you can. You can pass a law and say something ceases to exist. It doesn't mean it ceases to exist. We're still here. I'm still Ganyagahag. And they can't, a judge can't say that we don't exist. We're in the throes of battles with New York State every single day. Andrew Cuomo, we're battling New York State over gaming revenue, we're battling them over them trying to interfere. And I'm not going to talk about the gaming stuff as much. And to the extent that I want to talk about, mention the tobacco issue, and because I think it's important people know this. We carved out a private sector business that is also part of, oftentimes their native tribes, they're engaged in this business. And we utilize the fact that New York State cannot impose its taxation on us. We've been doing it for over 30 years. We've been in the tobacco business for about 10,000 years. In fact, you can go out to Lakota territory, and there are specific strains of tobacco that are in Lakota territory that specifically came from the Haudenosaunee, from the Lenape, from the Algonquins, and different people. So that's the trade that has gone on for thousands and thousands of years. So when John Rolfe, who kidnapped and brainwashed Pocahontas, co-opted the tobacco business into something that we never intended to be, they built something else. And when we re-entered that trade back 30, 40 years ago, New York State didn't know what to do about it, because they knew they didn't really have any legal foundation to stop them. But we weren't making cigarettes. We were just buying Philip Morris products, without the tax on it and selling it, non-native people coming onto our territories. But that's not the business as it exists today. Now we have major manufacturers on both the north side of the imaginary line, Oswego, Grand River in Ontario, Grand River Enterprises, manufacturers of Seneca brand cigarettes, and we have manufacturers in Washington, Yakima, and there's territories all around that are manufactured. New York State is suing any of the manufacturers, native manufacturers of native products from outside the state, suing them, trying to bar them from being able to bring from their product coming to our territories. Now this is native to native trading that Andrew Cuomo, Eric Schneiderman, and then the New York State Department of Taxation and Finance Commissioner Thomas Maddox, that they are fully engaged right now. And native to native trade, even if it's not a very politically correct product like cigarettes, is still something that we need to fight for. I don't fight for casinos, I don't fight for tobacco, but I do fight for sovereignty. And so we have to defend we have to stand up. And it's important that people know in New York State, in New York City, and across the country, that the things that we're engaged in with Andrew Cuomo is really an affront to all native territories. And again, he's suing a manufacturer in Yakima territory. So this is the battle we're still in every day. And I talk about these things, again, that's the value, and that's why I'm glad Tiokasin brought this subject to this forum. Because I don't know that I'm left. I don't know that I'm liberal. I know that I'm native. I know that I'm Ganyagahag. And I'll come back to this forum as long as they'll keep having this. And we'll make as much noise in every forum that they provide to us, including on the radio.